This portion of Scripture we'll be talking about is called Tavo. We are in the book of Deuteronomy still. In fact, we are really nearing the time when Moses is going to pass on and go up to the mountain and then never come back down again. So this is a portion where he is talking to the children of Israel and trying to get them to understand how they're supposed to act when they move into the nation, when they move into the land. When they're in the promised land, they will be in the promised land living with God. So they need to know how to behave before God. In this parasha, Ki Tavo, which means when you enter or when you go in. It's found in Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 1, goes all the way through chapter 29, verse 8. Moses instructs the people of Israel, when you enter the land that your Lord has given to you as an eternal heritage, and you settle it and cultivate it, and bring the first ripened fruits, the first bikharim, from your orchard to the holy temple, and you declare your gratitude for all God has done for you. That's how this is going to begin. And in our parasha, it includes the laws on the tithes. The laws of the tithes that are given to the Levites, to the poor. Detailed instructions on how to proclaim blessings and curses on Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. That was also discussed back in the portion of Re'eh, but here we hear them actually pull those forward. Moses also reminds the people that they are God's chosen people. And then we have the tochacha, the rebuke, which is where God talks about the curses that will be put on them if they don't follow his commandments. And after listing all the blessings and the curses, Moses goes along and has this harsh things to say about illness, poverty, and exile that shall befall on God's people when they refuse to follow the commandments. In fact, he kind of prophesies about the northern 10 tribes being scattered throughout the world. Moses concludes this by telling them that 40 years after their birth as a people, they have attained which is now called a heart to know and eyes to hear, or eyes to see and ears to hear. They've attained the heart for God. This first verse, actually this is the first and second verse of the portion. So over here we've got Ve'hi ki tavo. Let me read it over here so I can see it better. Ve'hi ki tavo el haaretz asher yachava Elohecha. Ne'atan lech nechala vir sharamata vayeshavata bi'ah. When you enter the land that the Lord God has given you as a heritage or as an inheritance, and you possess it and settle in it. Then the next verse, he says, and you shall take some of the first fruits of the soil which you have harvested from your land, and giving it to, that God has given to you, and put them in a basket and go and place it towards a place where God will choose to establish his divine name. So the couple of things we notice on these first verses is this isn't about them to do right away. This isn't a commandment that they're supposed to follow right this minute, because they are not yet in the land. And to bring the first fruits offering, you're bringing the first fruits offering to the place God established his name. And he states in here, when you enter the land your God has given you as a heritage and a possession, and you settle it. They haven't done that yet. They're getting ready to do so. So this is a commandment that we see put into effect a little bit later. One of the things I'd like to point out here is this word right here, Natan. We hear all the time that blessings, we've talked about it before, that blessings are favor from God, but they're not. The blessing is to know God intimately. That is what a blessing is. But this word, Natan, right here, is a gift or favor. When God's talking here, he's saying that I am giving this land to you as a possession. I am Natan, it's a gift to you. So he's telling them that they're going to go over here and take it over, but he's also saying that it's a gift because they're not taking it over. He's handing it over to them. There's a big difference between something they have to conquer and fight for and something that is given to them. If we remember back with the 12 spies, the 12 spies went and entered the land. And 10 of them came back with a bad report. And that bad report was, we can't win here. There's giants in the land. We can't take it. The land devours their people. So we can't win this. They forgot the promise that God had given them. This isn't about conquering the land. This is about it being a gift. He will go before you. And that's what the 12 spies saw. They didn't recognize it, but when they said the land devours its inhabitants, they said that because all the people of Canaan were going to funerals every day that they were in there. And they were in there for 40 days walking through that area without being discovered. They left with big, huge fruit and vegetables and stuff that they got back and brought back from there, and they still said we couldn't conquer it. A little bit later, we'll see Joshua and Moses send out 2 spies into the land. Those 2 spies get into the land, and they are discovered the very first day, almost killed. The harlot Rahab has to hide them out and lower them down on a rope so that they could escape. And yet they come back and they say, no problem, we got this. God's giving it to us, we'll take it. See the difference there? The 10 spies that went in, that wandered around there for 40 days, didn't have the idea that God is handing this over to them. But the 2 did. The 2 barely escaped with their lives. The 10 lived in there for 40 days. God went before them, destroying everything that would have discovered them. That's why they saw all these funerals happening. That's why they said it's a land that devours its inhabitants. But yet they didn't see the glory of God that walked before them, that killed the Canaanites and caused them to have to go to all these different funerals in order to keep them hidden. Their bad report was taking away from the faith that God had instilled into his people. Then here in the second verse it says, you shall take some of every fruit from the soil which you have harvested from the land that your God is giving you, and put it in a basket and take it to the place where your God will establish his divine name. Where is that place? Where does God establish his name? That's right, on the Temple Mount. This is actually a current picture of the Temple Mount right now. Something really wild is going on there. This is the eastern gate, the golden gate, the gate that Yeshua HaMashiach, when he was alive, walked through this gate up into the temple. This is the gate that the Mashiach, when he comes back in all his glory, will again go through this gate. When it was controlled by the Muslims, they boarded up and barricaded up and bricked up this gate, and then they put a graveyard in front of the gate. They did that because they know that the Mashiach cannot come in contact with a dead body. So if they bricked up the gate, the golden gate, the eastern gate, the gate the Mashiach is supposed to come in, well, you can't make it through there, right? And if they put all this graveyard out there, well, then he'll not even have a chance to go through there. My, oh my, do the Muslim people take our God and stick him into a small, tiny box? Because if you think that the God who created the entire universe can't get around those technicalities, you're nuts. But check this out. Another thing that's happening there is this is the place where God puts his name. Growing out of the eastern wall, out of the golden gate, is the Yod, the Hey, and the Vav. And the Hey will be, you can see it starting right here. His name is growing out of the side of the wall. If that's not a place he established his name, I don't know what is. He literally has written his name on that wall. So, when we're talking about what is to be brought, this first fruits offering, how do you figure that out? You've got a fruit tree, and bears many fruit. What is the first fruit? How do you find the first fruit on your tree? So what happened was, back in the day when the children of Israel were growing massive amounts of fruits and everything, they would go and see the first bud on the tree. And when they saw that first bud on the tree, they would go over there and they would wrap a string and tie it around there. And when that bud processed and became a fruit, that would be the first fruit. And they would bring that right into the temple and offer that to God. That is the first fruit of the tree. Moses says, you shall answer and say before the Lord your God, my father was a wandering Aramean.
Disconnected.
And he went down to Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, but there became a great and mighty populous nation. This is what's called the formula. Hold on one second. Zechariah, can you turn that off so it doesn't do that anymore? Thank you. This is called the formula. When you're bringing your first fruits into the temple, you're supposed to recite this formula. But there's a problem with this formula. We're talking about the children of Israel, not Armenians. They were not wandering Armenians. That's not who they were. But the problem is in the translation here, because this is actually not what it says. When we look at it in Hebrew, we find this. And you shall recite before your God, my father was a fugitive of the Armenian. And he went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there they became a great and populous nation. A fugitive. The Armenian they're talking about is Laban. When Jacob went over to Laban, he worked for 7 years, got the wrong wife, worked for another 7 years, got the right wife. After he was there for a while, he was tending to the sheep, and Laban said, okay, I want you to tend to my sheep, and then when it is finished, you can take some of them and go with you. And Jacob says, I got a great idea. You give me just your most perfect sheep, the ones that are without blemish. And as I am tending to these sheep for the next 5-10 years or so, when they reproduce, those that are without blemish I will give back to you. Those that come out with a blemish I'll take home to me. And Laban says, that's a good idea. That's great. They knew a little bit about genetics. They understood that if you had these wonderful, beautiful sheep with no blemishes, all white, that every one they would produce would be that. So Laban's thinking, this is great. Jacob's going to go tend to my sheep, and the payment he's going to get for tending to my sheep is taking the ones that are blemished. He's not going to get anything. This is wonderful. Sneaky guy, right? Well, Jacob was equally as sneaky because he went and knew a little bit about genetics, threw some pieces of wood into the water that the sheep were drinking, causing their coat to become spotted. After a while, they started reproducing spotted sheep. When it came time to go and leave, Jacob is returning very few sheep back to Laban, and he's got all the spotted sheep, tons of them. And he's leaving with great wealth. Laban was not happy about this, so he sought to kill Jacob. Hence, he was a fugitive of the Armenian. This is what we're talking about, because we're talking about the children of Israel. Jacob, his name changed to Israel. We're talking about his people. They were not wandering Armenians. They were fugitives of the Armenian. And then it talks about them going to Mitzrayim. This is the formula for bringing the first fruits. This is what they recite when they bring the first fruits. Does this have any weight on us? When we bring our tithe, shouldn't we have a formula and say something as well? Think about this formula. I am a fugitive, and I am coming out of Egypt. You brought me out of Egypt. A fugitive, somebody who is running from the law. Mitzrayim, the word that's said is Egypt, right? We know that word doesn't mean Egypt. It means a narrow place. When we bring our tithe, we should have a formula as well. It should look something like this. I have been running from your law, your covenant. I have been in a narrow place of my life, and you, my God, have put yourself in my place and brought me back to that covenant. Thank you for being a merciful and gracious God. That should be the formula as we bring our tithes and offerings and present them before the Lord, our first fruits. We should have that formula too. We should have the time to take and say this bracha, this blessing. I was a fugitive from your law, from your covenant. And I was in a narrow place of my life, but you, being a gracious and wonderful God, put my place, you took my place on that cross. You made sure my sin was forgiven, and I was brought back to that very same covenant, so now I may live out the covenant. Hashem, I have been running from your law and your covenant. I've been in a narrow place of my life, and you, my God, have put yourself in my place and brought me back to your covenant. Thank you for being a merciful and gracious God. That should be our formula. When we are bringing our tithe, have that running through your head to remind yourself that you are bringing your tithe to dedicate it to God and for his kingdom. And when you do so, acknowledging exactly what he did for you. That's what the formula is for. We have the formula when we say our blessings. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe. It comes before every blessing. Whether we're blessing the bread, whether we're blessing the wine, whether we're blessing the stars in the sky, or the lightning, or using the restroom. These blessings all start out with the same formula. God likes to hear that we know who He is, that we know what He's done for us. He likes to hear that we are aware of the sacrifices He has made for His people. He likes to know that we are aware that we are His greatest creation. It's very important that we look at our situation like that. Now, what is our first fruits? I forgot to look at these slides. I don't know if I'm on the right way. Oh, before we go there, how about this? That when you're bringing your tithe, and he talks about the tithe, he says this statement, that they may eat and eat to their fill in your settlements. We touched on this a couple weeks back. God commands us to give with an open hand, especially our tzedakah, our cheerful giving. He says, you will give with an open hand. Do not close your hand when you give. Don't go to give to somebody and in judgment close your hand. That they may eat their fill in your settlements. He's talking about giving not to a necessity, but giving to the want. He talked about that before when he was talking about tzedakah. He says, do not give to necessity, but give to the want. Give enough so the want is taken care of. When we walk about in, say, Albuquerque, and we see the homeless people on the side of the streets, some who may be on drugs, some who may have an alcohol problem or whatnot. It's so easy for us to look at that and say, you know what, I'll go buy them some food, but I won't give them any money. Well, shame on us for doing so. Shame on us. It is not up to us to judge what somebody is going to do with the tzedakah we give. We are commanded to give with an open hand, not to close it when we see something we don't like. We are commanded not to judge. All that we have comes from God. Everything we have comes from God. We're lucky He lets us keep some of it. And then when we are giving back for Him and we are giving the tzedakah that He commands us to give, how dare us to do it by closing our hand to those who we think are not going to use it appropriately? Is that for us to decide? Because the second that you give to somebody and they don't use it inappropriately, then they have just made you a sinner because you were going to withhold from them, because you put yourself in the place of Hashem, the righteous judge, and instead of Him being able to judge them on what they do with the tzedakah that's given to them, you decided to do so yourself. I just would like to say that when we go down and we see these people who are poor and less fortunate, and they need something, we give to their want, not to their need. If they want to go use it for things that aren't good for them, that's between them and God. You are fulfilling a mitzvah. That's what you are commanded to do. We are commanded to go down and give to these people what they need and what they want. God will discuss with them how they utilize it. That's not for us. In fact, think about what happened to Moses when he put himself in a place of judgment, when he put himself in a place of taking credit for God. The children of Israel complained because water was no longer flowing from the rock because Miriam had just passed away. We find this, I think it's in the end of the book of Numbers. So Miriam dies, so she's not able to be singing to the rock, so the rock that she sang to, Miriam's well, stopped producing the water. And what did Moses say? As everyone was upset because they didn't have any water right then and there. They didn't realize that Moses had just lost his brother and his sister, and the three main people, the trinity of people that brought them out of Egypt and brought them through the desert, standing before the promised land, those three people too are now dead. But the people didn't care. All they cared about was selfish nature, the fact that the rock wasn't producing water. So Moses comes down there and he says, what do I have to do to you rebels? Do I have to bring water from this rock for you? Ooh. We always hear that the reason Moses wasn't allowed to enter the promised land is because he hit the rock instead of spoke to it. That God said, go speak to the rock, and the rock will produce water, and Moses went down there with his stick and he hit it. But that's not what God said. God said the reason why you won't enter the promised land is because you took the faith of the people away from me. Because Moses said, do I have to bring water from this rock? So when we go and we give to the poor, don't put yourself in that place of judgment. We have a righteous judge. He is good, he is faithful, and he will judge what he needs to. Do what God commands you to do. Give with that open hand. Go down there and do what you can to give beyond what you even think your means are. There was a video that I saw recently that I actually sent over to Adam. This wonderful video about a man who was putting up his pledge to his rabbi for what he was to give. The rabbi comes over and sees him. He works for his family business. He's in this huge corner office overlooking the city. He's got a big mahogany desk. And the rabbi says, I want you to pledge $18,000. Or was it 16 or 18? $18,000. Man says, okay, no problem. So he pledges $18,000. End of the year comes up, he cuts the check to the synagogue for $18,000, no sweat. Well, during that year, he decides to start going into business for himself, leaving the family company. The rabbi comes that next year to see for that pledge. He opens the door to the office and his face goes white because the man is sitting at a cheap folding table that he bought from Walmart for about $30. He's sitting on a $10 Walmart folding chair. He's got one camera in his office and one computer in his office. And the rabbi looks and his face turns white and he gets still for a moment. He says to this young man, he says, I want to talk to you about your pledge this year. The man says, oh, he sees what's going on. He can see that I'm having a rough time starting my own company. I'm sure he'll be merciful on me on my pledge. He says, this year I want you to give $36,000. The man stops dead in his tracks. He says the rabbi stood still, and for a moment he was outside of time and space, thinking about this, thinking, how could he do this to me? How could he, seeing how hard it is for me to make ends meet right now, starting up my own company, ask for twice as much as he did when he saw me working for my family's company, sitting in a great office? How can he do this? And then he thought of it and he said, it's my commandments the Lord gives me. He says to give with a cheerful heart, to give tzedakah. So he says, you know what? It's not my problem. It's your problem. So a tear comes down his eye. He looks over at his rabbi and he says one word. Okay. He says that year he made more money with his new business than he ever made over at his family's business. And as this video goes on and he's talking, you see him standing there and pledging $150,000 to the synagogue. And he says, not only did I have the $150,000 to pledge, but I had plenty more. And then you see at the end of him holding this big old $250,000, $250,000 check, handing it to the rabbi. How does that happen? What is our tithe? What does this do? You know, it's funny because I swore I would never preach on tithing. And I swore I'd never preach on tithing because to preach on tithing and to say people need to put money on the plate shows a lack of faith of the rabbi that he is worried about things going on with the community or things going on with the synagogue or things going on with our people. But that's not the case at all. The Lord opened up my eyes to this and he says, it's not about that tithe. Because where you all decide to put your tithe is up to you. If you decide to go tithe to another church somewhere else or an organization that fits the needs you think and that is doing what it needs to do, just make sure that where you tithe is a place where they're using it for the Lord's good. But what is your tithe? What does it mean? Why did this young man pledge that money and get so much more out of it? God tells us in Malachi, let me see, do I have it written down here? Gosh, I went off of my teaching here, but God tells us in the book of Malachi. In the book of Malachi, he says, test me in your tithe, that I may open up the storehouse of heaven and rain down so much favor upon you that your buildings can't contain it. He says to test him. When we talked about the tithe back when they were giving it to Abraham, that he gave 1/10 of all he had, and then he got back from God 4 times as much. Think about those numbers. You give to God for what he needs to be able to do with, and he gives back to you. How could you afford not to? Like that young man was thinking about, how can the rabbi expect more out of me when he saw me in this place? But what he didn't realize is that our tithe is embedded in the laws of the universe. We've talked about this with the law of reciprocity. The law of reciprocity, when you go and you speak ill about somebody, somebody else is going to speak ill about you. When you treat somebody badly, you will be treated badly. These things are embedded in the universe. When God says, here's a list of the curses that will befall you for not following my commandments, he's not saying, hey, you're not going to follow my commandments? Me, I'm God, I'm in control of this universe, I will curse you. No, he's saying, warning, Will Robinson. If you don't follow these commandments, the laws embedded in the fabric of the universe will come against you. And they come against everybody. That's why the Buddhists say, karma. You have good karma, good things happen to you. You have bad karma, bad things happen to you. Why people who don't even know God say what goes around comes around. These laws are embedded in the universe, and so is the law of the tithe. The tzedakah. In fact, people who don't even believe in God, our greatest philanthropists, are rich beyond their belief because of how much they give away. God says, test him in this, because he knows it's a law embedded in the universe. He knows that when you do and fill your obligations, that he will bring more for you. So much for not teaching on this one, right? That they may eat their fill in your settlements. That they may eat their fill. Once again, this isn't to the need. To give to a need is what the world does. The world sees a need. They say, oh, this homeless person doesn't have socks. I'll give him socks. They say, oh, this person here is obviously hungry. I'll give them food. But what we, being the kingdom of the living God, we being Israel, we being his chosen people, what do? We do different than the world. We give with the open hand. We give as much as it takes to fulfill the need. When we talked about the 8 levels of giving, the highest level of giving was to give till the need was no longer there. The Chinese proverb that comes to mind is, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but if you teach a man a fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Some of the best ways we can give is to show somebody how to get out of the hole they're in, to regain ground and become successful on their own. Eat their fill. That's pretty amazing. So then it goes on here, it says, your God has commanded you this day to observe these laws and these rules. Observe them faithfully with your heart and your soul, and have affirmed this day that Yahweh is your God, in whose ways you will walk, in whose laws and commandments and rules you will observe, and to whom you will obey. And Yahweh has affirmed on this day that you are, as promised, God's treasured people, who shall observe the divine commandments. Why would I put that one up there? We all know we're supposed to be following God's commandments. This is what we've been talking about forever. This is what makes us different than the modern day non-denominational Christian churches. Because they, through the spirit of the law, decide to not follow the law and say, God knows my heart. Well, of course God knows your heart. He knows you're a disobedient child. But we talk about all the time that we are to follow the commandments of God. Not for our salvation. Our salvation is bought to us through grace and mercy alone. But we follow the commandments of God because my God is the King of the universe. And I know darn well that when I look at my children and I have one child who's disobeying and I have another child who's obeying, guess which one goes out for the ice cream? Not the disobedient one. I know that through obedience to God's commandments comes favor. But if we look at this closer, there's something even more interesting embedded in these words. Our free will. When we walk along the way in our free will, we can do things just as the world, or we can do things as God's people. We can live off of the selfish nature we have embedded in us, or we can live off of God's Spirit, which is embedded in us. One of the two, but we can't do both. But we need to make a choice. What we see here is your God commands you this day to observe these laws and rules, observe them faithfully with all your heart and your soul. You have affirmed that on this day, Yahweh is your God, and in his ways you will walk. Did you catch that? You have affirmed on this day. How many times have you heard that God will chase you down wherever you are? That God will keep running after you and chasing you? No, he won't. Not until you're his people. When Yeshua said that the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after the one wayward one, the one that walked away, he's making the point to let you understand that these are his sheep. When one walks away, he will leave the 99 to go after the one of his people who's fallen away. The key point being his people. God keeps telling us that we are to choose him to be our God, and then he will choose us to be his people. It doesn't go the other way around. If it went the other way around, what good would your free will be? If God chose you and you had no choice about it, what good would it be that you have free will? What God is saying here is, you have chosen me to be your God, so I have chosen you to be God's treasured people. In fact, other translations put it as a peculiar treasure for a peculiar God. A peculiar treasure. We are the king's treasure, but the reason we are the king's treasure is because we chose the king. We're in the month of Elul right now. The king is in the field. He is accessible to us in a way that we can only imagine. When a king comes back from fighting a war, he doesn't just all of a sudden go through a tunnel underneath the ground and pop up in his kingdom. He comes through the field. What is the field? It's where we work, where we live, where the people who are not in the king's court all the time, the heavenly angels, we have access to him at this point because he is coming back through the field. He is meeting us on the ground level of where we're at. That's what happens in the month of Elul. Ani ledodi vidodi li. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. Did you hear that? I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. Once again, in the acronym for Elul, we see that we choose to be God's people. We chose him to be our God. And now he is our God, and he chose us to be his people. We have the access and the power to be close to God this month like no other month in all the year. He is in the field. He is coming right through your area of work, your area of life, your house. This is the time we should be putting towards proper teshuvah, rolling out the red carpet for our King, allowing the King who is in the field to be an intimate part of our life. It's said that on Yom Teruah, it is the coronation day. It's the day that all Jewish kings were coronated before God to serve as king over Israel. That is why the month of Elul is the king is in the field. He has come home, he is walking through the field, and the coronation is going to happen on the first day of Tishri, when we blow the shofars and coronate the king of the universe into his kingdom. Right now, He's accessible. Right now is a time for us to choose him to be our God so that he will choose us to be his people. God is hidden. He's a hidden God, right? That's why the rest of the world doesn't see him. They say, well, you guys are nuts. You believe in something you can't see. Science can't prove. But yet they believe in nothing. Everything came from nothing. Or God. Which one is easier to believe? So the interesting thing, though, is that Elohim, our God, is hidden in all of nature. It's the divine hide-and-seek game. It's where we go around looking to find God in every little thing we can see. He's hidden in everything. His divine spark is in everything. When you create something, when you make a song, if you're a musician and you write a song, or if you're a painter and you paint a painting, a little bit of who you are is embedded in your creation. That's why you can look at a Picasso and say, I know that it's a Picasso. There's a Monet over there. I know that it's a Monet. Because everything they do has got that little telltale sign of who did it. So does everything in nature. When we talk about the gematria, the Hebrew language being such a sophisticated language, being a trinity in itself, it is both numeric, it is phonetic, and it is pictographic. It's a trinity in itself. Sound familiar? Our God's a trinity. The Ark of the Covenant's a trinity. We are a trinity. Our marriages are trinities. He loves to work in threes. When we look at the word Elohim, the gematria for the word Elohim is 86, but also the gematria to Hatava, which is nature, is 86. And studying the gematria, we realize that things that have the same number are linked together in a spiritual way that we can only fathom and comprehend slightly. It's really tough for us to grab a grasp, a hold of it. But yet, they are linked spiritually. And as we dig deep, we realize that that is why our God is a hidden God. Because he is embedded in everything he created. I know it sounds weird, but he's in the wind. I know it sounds weird, but he's in the rain. He's in the rocks. He's in the air you breathe. To say 100 brachas a day, 100 blessings a day, is what they talk about in the Talmud. They say, saying 100 brachas a day, 100 blessings a day, and more favor will be put upon you for doing so. And we look at that and we say, that's really, really, really tough to do. How does one say 100 blessings a day? But God is in everything, and there's a blessing for everything. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, the formula to the blessing, followed up by him being in the wood, chayetz, him being in the fruit of the vine, pri hagafen, him being in the fruit of the land, pri haaretz, him being in the lightning that flashes across the sky, him being in the air you breathe, him being in everything. Because just as an artist makes a painting and a little piece of them is in that painting, all of creation is a beautiful artwork built by God, and he is in every little itty bitty nuance of it. When you think of it that way, it's not so hard anymore. Because what your eyes get set upon is what you can say a bracha about, a blessing about. Remember, blessing isn't giving something to God that he doesn't already have. Blessing isn't bestowing upon him a good thing, because he encompasses everything that is good. The bracha, the blessing, is to know him intimately. To know him intimately. To know without a shadow of a doubt that there is a God and he created the entire universe, and that he is the one who decided to put a Mashiach on the cross, himself, his word, up there for you, so that you may be drawn back to his covenant, so that you may not have to, have the opportunity to say 100 blessings a day. I'm not sure what other slides I have left here. Oh, that was the last one. So take it upon yourself on these days, especially during this month of Elul, to realize the king is in the field. Not only is the king in the field, but he is the field. You know, you've heard it said, what happens if you wake up tomorrow with only the things that you thanked God for today? Your life would be a little bit less. There'd be, I don't know, one less car in your driveway, maybe less of a job you have to go to next day. I mean, we all pray for our children. We all thank the Lord for our children. We all thank the Lord for things that we find prominent in our life that we care about a lot. But did you ever think to thank God for the ground beneath your feet? Or the sky above your head? The air you breathe every day? The rain that falls like today? Did you think to thank Him for the food that's in your fridge? We just went through the entire Exodus, 40 years of wandering the desert, and the children of Israel had to rely upon God to feed them. So they were able to understand that. But we open our fridge and it's overflowing with food. We waste more food than we eat. These things happen because we are in America and we are graciously favored by God. There is so much that we have. 100 blessings a day is not hard when you're thanking God for all the things that you have, because you've got more than 100 things to thank Him for. Try that in your life. Throughout your day, keep those words in your head. The formula. Blessed are you, the Lord our God, King of the universe. And then follow it up with what you're thankful for. Follow it up with what your eyes are set upon right now. What things are beautiful. What things are neat. What things are entertaining. What things that we have, from the food we eat, to the water we drink, to the air we breathe, to the ground beneath our feet and the sky above our heads. Thank God for every little thing you see. And watch how having that understanding, that bracha, that blessing, knowing God that intimately, turns out that He knows you so much more intimately than you can imagine. And He rains favor down upon you. Deuteronomy is all about the fact that when we are obedient to God, it brings favor to us. And how much more obedient can we be by presiding 100 brachas, 100 blessings a day for everything we see, everything that comes across our path, even those things that don't seem good. Remember, Paul said it very well in Romans 8:28. All things work for the good of the Lord and those who are called according to His purpose. All things. Did you ever think of thanking God for your illness or your flat tire? Kind of weird, huh? Why would I thank God that I woke up this morning and my tire was flat? All things. Maybe your tire was flat so that you didn't get into an accident on the highway on your way to work. Praise the Lord. My tire was flat this morning. Baruch Hashem, praise His name. That's great, because what He did with that flat tire, you being somebody who is called according to His purpose, saved you from something that may not have been so good, or put you in a position to have something to thank God for you never thought you should.
Isaiah 57 says, "Blessed is he who dies in the Lord. The righteous perish and no one ponders in his heart. The good man falls to be saved from calamity."
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine what calamity was so bad in Charlie Kirk's life that God saved him from it? Can you imagine if the young perish? People, we don't understand why the death happens.
Mm-hmm.
Death is a gift of God. Charlie is sitting in the same scene tonight.
That's something that we do need to think about, because when somebody dies who's part of our family or part of our friendship, we always go into mourning on it, but yet they are home. 30 days of mourning and 30 days of celebration is what the Jews do, because we're celebrating the homecoming, the fact that we don't belong here in the first place. We got plucked out of heaven and placed down here. That well of souls isn't here, it's in heaven. Upon conception, God plucks a soul out of that well of souls and places it into the womb. Remember, we talked about the different souls we have. We have 2 souls. That's something you're not going to hear in Christianity. You're only going to hear the fact that you have the Holy Spirit residing inside of you, the Spirit of God inside of you, so be accountable to that. But yet we have 2 souls, because everything that is alive has a soul. A dog has a soul, a monkey has a soul. The difference is between the 2 souls. One is the Yetzer Hara, and the other one is the Yetzer HaTov. The Yetzer Hara, the word that we have, Ra, meaning evil, is what it's translated in Hebrew, doesn't mean that at all. It means natural. It means self-centered. A dog is not an evil animal, but yet it will kill for its own, to save itself. A dog is not an evil animal, but yet it will eat the lion's share of the food before allowing something else to get it. It's not evil. It's just selfish. It's the animal instinct. When we use the Yetzer Hara, we are using that animal's soul that's inside of each and every one of us. That thing that causes us to be alive. It's self-preservation. Self-preservation. Self-indulgence. A wise rabbi, Rabbi Sachs, said, selflessness is not thinking of yourself less, but thinking about yourself less. Not thinking that you are worth less, but thinking less about yourself so that you think more about others. That's using the Yetzer HaTov. Through this portion, Moses talks about the blessings and the curses. And through this portion is why we get on there and we figure that one out. And Jack, I totally forgot to touch on this for you. This is the portion that talks about the third year tithe too. Let me find it really quick here because I had it here. It says, when you have sent aside 1/10 of your yield in the 3rd year of the tithe, and you have given it to the family of the Levite or the stranger or the fatherless and the widow, that they may eat and to their fill in your settlements, you shall declare before the God, and he gives you that formula. What is the 3rd year tithe? Why does he have to specifically talk about a 3rd year tithe? People have thought about this and they're like, oh look, you only have to actually tithe once every 3 years. That in the 3rd year is the year you bring it to the storehouse. But that's actually not it at all. It's actually regarding the 3rd year tithe is regarding a tithe that was withheld in your home. Rashi explains it in Mishnah Torah, and he says, the Torah fixed the time for removal of the tithes and the subsequent affirmation on the eve of the Pesach of the 4th year. For it says every 3 years of the 7-year cycle, on the end of the 3rd year of the Shemitah, you are to take it out. Rashi goes on to say that this same wording for the Torah we need to apply as well. Thus makes it the festival of Pesach, because the same wording, when we study Torah, the first time a word is used in Torah gives it its root meaning. And from then on, that root sticks to that word. Because remember, we're talking about a language that is God's language. It's the first language to exist. Everything was created through it. Sometimes in this language, we have words that we're hearing for the very first time. And when we take it into the context of what it was used in the first time, that will be its context for the rest of the times it's used. So in here, that context was Pesach. So right before Pesach, right on the 3rd year, is when you're to get out of your house the tithes that you've stored up. What they're talking about is you may have made a pledge to give a certain amount of money to a certain person. And you're withholding it in your home until you see that person. And God says you can do that for 1 year, you can do that for 2 years. You can do that for 3 years, but before the end of the 3rd year, you need to get that out of your house and put it where it needs to be. You can't just sit on it. The 3rd year tithe is for a tithe that you've been withholding in your home for a special purpose. And God's saying, on the 3rd year, get off your lazy butt and make that purpose happen. That's what the 3rd year tithe is. That's right. The Torah is reaffirming tzedakah constantly. It's reaffirming the fact that we should give. And that doesn't mean here. That means to the poor, to the widows, to the less fortunate. The tzedakah box we have out there, that's a great place to give because that money gets pulled out of there, stuck into a few different bags, and gets given directly to the poor out there in the street. Directly to them. It's a great place to give your tzedakah. Just remember that God commands you to give with that open hand, not to withhold. And if you withhold it in your house for 3 years, get off your lazy butt and go give it away. It's time to do so. So again, this brings us back to not judging people as well. That open hand gift. Keep it in mind that we are his treasured possession. Keep it in mind that we can find him in everything, and keep it in mind that even those who are less fortunate than us are still one of his greatest creations. Even though we have disobedient children, the parents do not love them less than the other. They may not rain down as much favor upon them, but they don't love them any less. God loves every one of his creation. Sooner or later, they'll come to him. And when they do, they're no different than us. That is the teaching for today, and Shabbat Shalom.